Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. I'm Sean LaFlock, and today I spoke with Scotty about transforming your clients into superheroes. We talked about the frequency of training and nutrition factors involved, lifestyle factors, and also how to train functional movements to get the body that you want. We also go into basic training programs and how pharmaceuticals, quote unquote, affect the outcome. Guys, if you like today's podcast, please subscribe, rate it, review it, share it with your friends, and enjoy today's podcast, episode 137 of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.
Scott, how goes it?
Hey, it's going good.
Nice, man.
Going good.
So I got to take a look at a video from Vanity Fair this last weekend, and there is a celebrity trainer who has trained like multiple actors and actresses in Hollywood. And his name is Jason Walsh. He's obviously out of L.A., but he's worked with Bradley Cooper, John Krasinski, who is on The Office and ended up doing 13 Hours, Emily Blunt, Allison Brie, Emma Stone. So tons of actors and actresses, and basically transforming them into the roles that they're playing. And he'll work with them anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. And I think we both follow also Ben Bruno, who works with some very high-level talent, Kate Upton, Justin Timberlake. And he works with some fairly high-level athletes, and I imagine this guy, Jason Walsh, does as well. However, these celebrity trainers are basically given the task of transforming an actor or actress in 12 weeks from a normal-looking person, and by normal I mean they're not overweight, but they're not overly muscular. They're just like an average Joe you would see walking down the street, and they're tasked with transforming them into their role within 12 weeks. And I thought, man, what would I do, or what would Scott do to transform this actor or actress in 12 weeks into that role? So, right off the bat, Scott, where does that take your head?
Well, I'll say the first thing is that this is definitely, a little out of the realm of something that I typically would do in training.
Perfect.
So I'm not speaking from experience with all various clients I've tried this out on.
Yeah, you haven't had like Tom Cruise come to you and be like, yo, I want to look like a badass?
No. They didn't need anybody jack for Portlandia, so,
Fred Armisen wasn't the guy for you?
If we could make somebody look like a skinny vegan, that would be the reverse of this. Maybe
we got that down.
Likely. Yeah. So, but anyway, so a number of things. Just bullet points right off the cuff. They're going to need a fairly high training frequency through the week. Obviously, nutrition is going to have to be really tightly dialed in. Probably very boring and functional. We're going to have to dial in there as best as possible the lifestyle factors to support the sudden changes.
Which would include?
We have to make sure they're sleeping enough to get, sleep. We have the nutrition dialed, but then what recovery practices that will allow for them to train with the frequency and volume they're going to need to make a fairly spectacular change. And then we would stick with functional movements that have a strong anabolic response, but again, because we train for aesthetics, there would probably certainly some isolation work that we might not normally see in our CrossFit-esque gyms. That would have to be a fairly important part of the process as well.
So assuming that the individual coming into this doesn't have a huge training background, and obviously we could talk about maybe someone who has a little bit more of an athletic background, would that influence the decision-making in terms of the programming?
You would definitely have to, because they're essentially beginners. You still can't take someone who has really never had much strength training and just throw them into an advanced program.
Yeah.
Not only are they not going to get the results, it's still good. It would look really pretty basic. It would be different than what you would typically do with, your average, Joe or Jane accountant that comes in and just wants to look better, because we have an accelerated timetable, and obviously if it's somebody with a role that they have to fulfill, it's a very important career thing. So it's a different urgency, I think, right? More than just somebody I just would like to look good. So you'd have to take that into account. But I don't think it's not going to require any tricky loading strategies or crazy, forced reps and, all these various things that more advanced trainees might need. And there's other things I would probably do like I would probably do, assuming they've never used creatine, right? You could do a creatine loading cycle right near the end when it's whatever they're ready for their role, because you can get that sudden initial cell volumization. Not everyone responds to, but a lot of people do. And that could add a bunch of muscle right just transiently right when they need it.
Yep. And I mean, my thought was basically send them to a doc right off the bat and be like, this is what their goal is. And they have 12 weeks and you take care of that aspect of it and make it so that they can train twice a day and not break down. So,
okay. So then yes, that would be, and that may very well go on.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, when we look at these transformations of actors and actresses, the specific one they talked about was Bradley Cooper going into American Sniper. I think it was like between 6 and 12 weeks or something like that. He weighed 185, and then at the end of the training that they were doing 2-a-days, he weighed 220 or 225. So to put on 40 pounds, I mean, he said he was basically eating for a living and then training and then obviously preparing for the role, but there's some shit going on there.
Yeah, there's something more than just training. Yeah, and that probably does actually happen in the large majority of these cases, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
That is The Rock is outside of my realm of experience.
He's probably got about 10 grand of Tijuana's best flowing through his veins. But I think that's also something to appreciate and to point out that these individuals are probably under the supervision of a doctor. So obviously they're doing their due diligence in terms of their safety and health, but they also are going to be paid, let's say in the case of Bradley Cooper, between $10 and $20 million to do this role, in which case the juice is worth the squeeze. There's probably some minute risk in terms of what they're doing. But to become that role, it would be really, really important for them to do those extracurriculars and to turn them into that role.
Right.
So, given that idea, Scott, would that affect the way that you go about it at all? And to be honest with you, do you think there would be an enormous, like this night and day benefit to doing some of Guadalajara's spicy vitamins?
I would imagine, especially you've got essentially a somewhat newbie, you're getting, not only are you getting newbie gains, but now you're getting, newbie to the cocktail gains as well. Like it could be, pretty powerful. But again, I'm just speaking from theory because, I have never worked with somebody that was juicing, or at least that I was aware of, or that I even would suspect in the slightest was. So, I don't know, but people take them for a reason. I don't think it's
because they work.
They work.
Especially when the individual is also bought into the idea that they're doing this and that they're going to be eating a certain way, not wasting what they're doing, and believe it or not, I think obviously it's all about finding motivating factors for people, and the people that I've worked with who are on TRT, they don't want to waste it, so they don't screw around in their training. They're not messing around with their eating as much. So obviously there's the pharmaceutical factor of things, but like the buy-in and the personal accountability, I think, is heightened in those individuals because they are really, really bought into the process, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, if you're
and proactive,
you've put that amount of effort and putting yourself in through that.
Yeah,
you're not gonna half-ass the other pieces, most likely.
Yes, exactly. Now, the other cool thing about this, and it got me thinking, was like working with individuals for a 6 to 12 week block actually makes it really, really nice as to, okay, what's your goal within this 6 to 12 week training block? And I know it goes back to kind of things we normally talk about, but like if you worked with that individual and you were like, yo, all that matters is this 6 to 12 weeks. And when we get to the end of that 6 to 12 weeks, let's reassess where we're at and create new goals and create an ongoing path. So I really like it in the idea that, like, it's a definite endpoint. And when you take like a lifelong of training of like, yo, it's about 6-week blocks or 12-week blocks, it becomes a lot more manageable and it becomes much more attainable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly from a programming standpoint, it's pretty nice to have a clear goal and a clear endpoint, and you can really create a nice structure around it. It's, when you're programming for someone, basically for the foreseeable future, and they've achieved a lot of things, but, it can be a little, you have to come up with
Yep.
goals or something along the way to keep things anchored and have a direction.
Exactly. And, like what I started doing, so I in finding inspiration in this today, I sat with a client who I started working with. He's probably a half a pack to a pack a day smoker. I think about 10 years ago, he had gastric bypass surgery and ended up, losing a bunch of weight, losing like 80 to 100 pounds. But, since then has kind of lost purpose and is now, 57 years old, has really fallen into bad habits, doesn't have a self-awareness about diet, etc. And today I was like, listen, I want to like find out what you can do in 6 weeks. And that's all I really count on. Like, so I'm like, if you're in, let's do this. And obviously I'm going to be meeting with him once a week to do personal training, but then I'm going to be doing, remote coaching other than that. But realistically, I think it's an opportunity to like explore what this can possibly do to keep myself motivated for this 6 weeks. You know what I mean? Because we get kind of inundated and we get kind of bogged down and like, all right, it's just monotonous this. But like if it's only 6 weeks and we go after it with that vigor, let's see what happens and then reevaluate things after that.
Yeah.
And get that motivation from doing good 6 weeks and seeing what the result was. Like, oh, wow, if we only judge it on this 6 weeks and we lost 5, 10, 15 pounds, we're doing the right thing. Whereas if we're looking at it in this grand scope of things, it's like, it's so hard to get caught to not get caught up in the weeds of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it maybe probably helps cut down on some of the superfluous stuff in programming too. If you have a very clearly defined goal, like
Yes,
it can be tempting to throw in a lot of stuff where you've got you're doing a bunch of different stuff. Sometimes it's mentally a bit daunting for folks.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you block it out, you can make good progress in one area and then jump to a bit of a different focus, and you don't lose nearly so much.
Yeah, exactly. And then allows you to kind of like dovetail different training cycles in. Like, okay, you did a mass cycle. You put on 5 pounds of muscle in this 8 weeks or this 12 weeks. Okay, cool. So now we want to be focusing on this. And when you have tangible goals, it makes it just so much easier as a coach and a trainer to put together good programming, give them good advice when it comes to their nutrition and sleep protocols, etc. And it makes it overall more of a pleasant experience. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think those are all great points on that for sure.
Now, another aspect that comes up in terms of this idea of the celebrity trainer is how do we balance that versus someone coming to you and saying, hey, I want to look like that. Okay, so what is your response to the individual who goes, I want to look like, and I've heard this one before, is I want to look like Thor from the Avengers. Like, get me to look like them. So what is your response there? Like, how come I don't look like that? I've been working hard. Well, let's say it's a person off the street, haven't been training very much. I want to look like that. What can you do for me?
Well, I would have to explain. This is many years of training, probably, and probably some supplements as well. And I think you have to lay out the realistic expectations of what that actually takes. And then, are you willing to go down those roads? And once again, like I've not dealt with anabolics. That's definitely one thing I'm really not that interested in going down the road of. So I might have to pass them if that really was what they wanted to do, and they were very determined to do it. I might have to pass them along to somebody that might be more their speed.
Yeah.
But I'd be happy to have a conversation about you know, what it does take to get like that, and
Yeah.
or if they, want to just train to look jacked and maybe realize that maybe they're not going to look quite like Thor. I don't really want to go down the road of any Tijuana
Yep.
tasties. Then that might be a possibility. But.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also fair. You know what I mean? In a sense that I don't want to be giving false expectations to the individuals, right? Like, hey,
Right.
listen, this is what they did to get ready for this role. They worked their asses off and made this their profession for probably 4 hours a day. Plus, they probably hire personal chefs. Then they're going to see, age restoration clinic type stuff, and they're making this their livelihood along with practicing the craft of acting or acting. Like that's
Right.
what they do. So.
Yeah. So for the dude with a career and a family, it's like, you're not going to have that kind of time to do the training and do the eating and food preparation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely an important conversation to have for people. But I just also appreciate the fact that if you give people more attainable and more isolated frames, instead of thinking, okay, you're going to train for the next 30 years. You're going to train for the next 6 weeks. Let's attain as much as we can. And really micro goaling training cycles and purposes in order for them to stay motivated and also to not be overwhelmed by the amount of work that they'll eventually do.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. And that's a good reminder, that maybe I should segment things down more than I do for folks, or even myself sometimes,
Yeah. And again, I thought about that too. It's like, okay, so if you're doing 6 weeks and you break it down from there, are you doing this many training sessions? Okay, I can do that. And then when I get there, then let me think about the next thing. And I mean, you can even do that. The reason I say 6 weeks is because it's, I think, that sweet spot of you can see some results from your training. So it's not like 1 week. You're like, oh, at the end of this week, let's make an assessment of what's going on. You're not going to be able to see anything after that, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
But after 6 weeks or 12 weeks, you're like, whoa, I saw 5 pounds, weight loss. I saw a improvement in my bench press by 20 pounds. Like that allows us, I think, more tangible ways of creating change in that long term. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
What do you think about obviously we went over kind of weight training protocols and stuff like that, but would you consider any conditioning or metabolic conditioning for these individuals? Assuming that, let's say for men, they're going from, let's say they're trying to get from 160 to 180 in that 12-week period, or maybe just a 10 to 15 pound increase. Where let's not say that they're using extra supplements, more of just being super diligent on all those things that we talked about.
Yeah.
So would you consider any of that metabolic stuff, or would you just go straight up higher intensity and in volume?
I think I would probably go that route. It would depend a little bit if, again, we're assuming it's a performer of some form.
Yep.
Are they going to be appearing in a shirtless or just with a bra on? And are we going to actually need to see abs, or is it just going to be, are they going to look like a medieval warrior with sleeveless? So we only really need to see definition of shoulders and arms and legs, maybe. Right. So then they could be because their costume would hide if they didn't have a 6-pack, possibly,
Yeah.
So these are all things you'd have to consider, because I think any amount of thing that even could compete with ability to grow muscle a little bit would be maybe a problem if maximum muscle growth is the pure objective. But if we have to be super lean too, then then.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and obviously then we probably tweaking macronutrients and caloric intake there as well, depending off if you have that ability to do that as is.
Right, that's what could be where maybe there's a cycle involved where you have 12 weeks to prepare for the role. There's some of it is hypertrophy, and then it goes into a fat loss cutting phase at the end, basically a compressed bodybuilding cycle. Much shorter than what a contest prep might normally be, just accelerate it all. And
What would be like if you could name like 3 exercises that would be your go-to for these individuals for putting on the most size and let's say functional size, let's say. What would be like 3 staple exercises for you?
This would assume that they are relatively mobile. A snatch grip deadlift is a great one because it somewhat covers squat and hinge pattern, but a lot of scapular retraction and things. We can get a lot of work done there if the person is capable of doing it. If not, then some other form of deadlift would have to be in there, even if it was a trap bar deadlift or something, whether it's partial range of motion. I would probably want to use some form of a loaded squat, maybe not necessarily a front or a back squat. It would depend on the person's skill, but I happen to like double kettlebell front squats at tempo or fairly awful, and really you have a high. Have to believe they produce a high anabolic drive due to the amount of stabilization required.
Yep.
And then as far as pressing, you'd probably have to go with bench press just so that you can handle the largest amount of load there.
Yep.
Typically, but those would be sort of foundational, and then you would go with other things to fill in, hopefully.
Yeah. Any kind of like functional type pushing, pulling sleds, anything like that, or would you kind of stick mainly to the lifts or something like that?
I think I would stick probably more to the lifts. It's possible that we would do sled work as sort of recovery and metabolic, high intensity metabolic work, maybe as one of the, again, I'm kind of assuming 2 a days, and we've got covering, hitting lots of bases. I would certainly have it a place to play in that for sure. It's like a PM kind of flushing, concentric only type of a session.
Yeah. Now, as for, let's say, a female role where maybe putting the size on isn't quite as much and maybe getting that, like, I hate to say it, but that toned look.
Right.
What would change for that individual, Scott? Would it be something with the rep schemes, the loading? What do you think?
I mean, I'm not going to go high reps there. I mean, typically, I would probably 8 to 10 rep range, and some
with any kind of tempo there.
I was just going to say, and probably some slower, controlled tempos in a lot of cases. Really, in all cases, we said we want to kind of have the time under tension managed pretty good, whether we're looking for male or female on this, but we want enough loading in the case of the female client to actually see meaningful change in that length of time.
Yeah, so you're saying higher time under tension for a female athlete just because usually the loading isn't be quite as significant?
Generally, well, of course, females can handle generally a higher percentage of their 1RM for reps.
Yep.
So I'm not going to go crazy high reps by any means, but I would probably, again, and because we're again sort of assuming someone that doesn't come in as an experienced strength trainee already. So I'd be sticking maybe the 8 to 12-ish range, medium tempos that could cover for stability requirements, assuming possible some hypermobility, maybe.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, there'd certainly be individualization around all that, but that would just be kind of a general thought process I might have.
I think that's pretty cool there, Scott. And I know you're on a bit of a time crunch here, so I think we'll probably wrap that up for today. And if there's anything else that we kind of come up with, maybe we'll do a part 2 to create a superhero.
Maybe touch on it a little bit.
Next time.
Touch on it a bit next week. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, this is the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Scott, if we need to get a hold of you, how can we do that?
I'm Scott Hagness, and you can always get me at scott@crossfitportland.com.
And I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean@crossfitdelraybeach.com. Scott, I'll see you next week, buddy.
See you next week.
Later, dude.
Later.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share this with your friends. And tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays for new episodes of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Take care, guys.